Um, and I'm going to try to do a gallery view for a moment here. Okay, I do need to know if you guys can hear me. I can't see your images. Okay, there's one person who hasn't yet been able to. Let's see. Yeah, I'll just admit this person now. Hopefully that takes care of it. I just need to know before we start the lecture portion of tonight, if you guys can hear me. I can see a couple of you now. Okay, can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Good, thank you. Yeah, all right, we're going to do screen share and let's hope that that works. Yeah. Oh boy.
Okay, I'm seeing it on my screen.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you very much. Yeah, so I'm just gonna, not that I don't want to, it's a matter of having the images available for us to talk about and see large enough. There we go, for us to take, for you, I mean, to see while we take notes. Okay, here's how to take your notes. I'm gonna tell you this again, maybe twice, but I'm not gonna keep repeating it every week. So make a note of it now. You should divide all your notes for each of the slides from the syllabus. We're going to stick to the slides, the first 4 from the syllabus tonight, into 2 categories. Meaning, I would give it a subheading, like just write the word meaning, either in all caps or however, underline it. Oh, there we go. Please don't. Yeah. And my daughter did tell me during the break, she's had the same problem because of the weather with her high school Zoom classes. And the teachers there at her high school said it is at least largely due to the weather. So what can we say about that? Just hopefully it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm only seeing 3 participants from my screen. Are you seeing a similar number?
23, it says at the top, but they may or may not all be able to see this. I don't know what else I can do but proceed because it's getting late. You can see the image, right? Yeah, I know what you're saying. It could be some of them are having trouble going back.
Yeah, I can see it. I'm just
Okay, at least I hear a couple more people. Yeah. Okay. 21 people have entered the
I
waiting
think there's
room.
only 2 of us students in here right now.
Okay, thank you. I see. It didn't admit everybody as it should have. This should have admitted a bunch more people. Yeah. Okay, it looks like it worked. Okay, I see images of people's handles or whatever you guys call them with your names. Okay, so now it's more. I'm not using the gallery view because I want to move forward with this. I'll start over with the.
I'll get Advil tomorrow.
Here's the way to take your notes. I was saying this, but not everybody was able to join. Now, hopefully, all 24 or 5 of you have. Okay. You should have your notes divided into 2 categories for each slide from the syllabus. And I will always tell you when each category comes up. The first category is meaning. That's all of the facts that you need to know in case that slide is on the midterm or the final about the meaning of it. And I'll explain that in just a minute for this first slide. The other category is formal, 2 words, formal analysis. Now that will be kind of nebulous to some of you because if you've never taken art history, it wouldn't mean much. I will explain it as we go, but next week, we're going to spend the whole first portion of next week 2 lecture with a whiteboard that I bought just for this purpose that I'll have mounted on my wall. And you can see to the 9 techniques, we call them elements of composition, that artists can use to create a visual work of art. I will explain them all in much more detail next week. If I did that now, we would have no time to talk about any of the slides tonight. I want to get you slow with starting slow, just slowly into the practice or the habit of taking notes with those 2, I'll say it again, 2 categories. So if you didn't do it already, now you should write on your piece of paper where you should be taking notes for each of these 4 slides, starting with this one. Meaning. And I will now tell you the title.
No, but
It's
I
on your
don't know.
syllabus.
Those are good.
It's on your syllabus, but I always will state the title and spell it once. We don't want to get too bogged down. Libyan Sibyl is the title of this first slide from the syllabus. Libyan is Libyan, like the country Libya. Sibyl is Sibyl. The artist's name, well, I think you all know how to spell it. Michelangelo, right? With a CH, of course. This is on your syllabus, so you should have that in front of you. The date 1512, I give you guys a break on dates on the test. Again, you can use your notes, so it shouldn't be too difficult. You can round off any date to a 0 if it isn't already. So you could just write for 1510. Okay, what's the meaning of this slide? Well, first I'm going to just move this a little bit here. Try to get this. There we go. There we go. That's better. Okay, so this is a painting on the ceiling of a chapel in Rome. Now, if you are Catholic or Italian, you know it's not Rome because it's called the Vatican, but we don't want to get that detailed. I try to keep things simple, especially at the beginning. So I'll say it again. The first sentence you should be writing now in your notes under meaning, the heading of meaning, is that this is a fresco. And I'm going to define that in just a moment. A fresco or painting on the ceiling of a chapel in Rome. And second fact, it's one of 18 scenes painted by Michelangelo on that ceiling, which are all scenes from the Bible. You can say 18 panels. Okay, it's one of 18 scenes or panels that Michelangelo painted on the ceiling of that chapel in Rome. Now, I'll tell you the name of it, but I'm not going to hold you to that. Anybody here been to Rome? You may have seen this. If you went to Rome, I imagine you went to see it. It's so famous. It's called the Sistine Chapel. You have to know the spelling of any word that's not on the syllabus. You get no points off if you don't spell it exactly right. But the correct spelling of that chapel is Sistine, if you want to write it. The Sistine Chapel in Rome. It's world famous because no other artist ever did that, right? Spent 4 years. It's another fact about it. It took Michelangelo 4 years of lying on his back 65 feet above the floor. He actually fell from the stairs once, luckily not from the top of the scaffolding, but he'd have died and almost, injured himself. Well, he did. So it was a tough job, a difficult assignment, and he's kept at it for 4 years. It took him to finish the ceiling with these 18 different panels, all of which again were scenes from the Bible. But that doesn't tell us what this individual scene is depicting. So once again, I'm going to try and move this up a little. Oh, someone else wants to be admitted. Yeah. Okay, so this is a fresco. What is a fresco? Now you should have with you, I've said this earlier, the first part of tonight and in my email to all of you, you should have printed out the list of terms to know for Art 1.2. Always have that with you all the time during any of the Zoom lectures next to your computer so you can fill in the definitions. They're not, most of them, very long. A few of them are, but this is a short definition. So you see it here. It's the first word with room to write the definition below. Fresco is a painting on wet plaster. Very simple. Again, a fresco is a painting on wet plaster. So that's what this is. So that means, of course, that he had to paint it fairly rapidly because once the plaster dries, that's it. The painting's done. You'd have to scrape all the plaster off and start over if you didn't finish. So he obviously was not only a genius. Yeah, get this next person admitted. Michelangelo wasn't only a genius, obviously he was in his skill as a painter, but he was one of the most prolific artists in the history of art. He produced more total paintings and frescoes and of course drawings, right, than almost any other painter before him. Now, later on, Van Gogh outdid him. Van Gogh painted more than anyone else in just 7 years. We'll talk about Van Gogh later. Okay, so what else can I say about the meaning that you should be writing? Well, who is a Sibyl? A Sibyl is a figure from the Bible. It's somewhat like an angel, but they're not technically. Again, if you're into all this stuff, you know this, but you don't have to know that much detail. So don't just say it's an angel-like or similar to an angel, a supernatural being. Who can tell the future? to anyone on earth if God tells her to do so. They're both male and female siblings, by the way. So this is a female fortune teller, you could say. You could write it that way. The right word is prophet, a prophet, someone who can tell the future. She is reading, or about, I should say, about to read, and here we go with the cursor. Oh, another person wants to admit. That is in the book she's about to read from the book of, right, prophecies. There it is. About the future to someone on earth. She's going to tell them whatever question or answer, I meant to say answer, whatever question they have. That's her job. That's what God tells her to do. If he thinks the person who had that question is worthy of an answer. For instance, if someone asks, will my son or daughter survive this illness? Will I die in battle tomorrow? Will I be happy if I marry this person or not? That kind of life or death question is her job to answer. And she has to look it up in the book. It's according to the Bible, obviously, that's how she knows how to answer those questions. So she's about to do that for someone down on earth. She's looking down to someone on earth, and God has given her the go ahead, the permission to answer their prayer in the form of, their question, in the form of a prayer. Well, who's this though? That is a cherub, or some people say cherub with a hard CH. Doesn't matter how you pronounce it. You have it written for you. I'm not going to spell it. On the second term now on your list of terms to know. What is a cherub? It's a baby angel, comma, often found in Renaissance art. A baby angel often found in Renaissance art. It could be found in sculpture, in architecture, painting, drawing. Here it is in a painting, a fresco. Well, what's he doing? We'll assume it's a boy. We don't know that. Sometimes angels don't have any gender, but this isn't an angel. So this is clearly a female sibyl. That is clear from the Bible, and Michelangelo also said that. So this is a little, and these were identified as baby boy angels, you can call them. So a baby angel, male baby angel, is a kind of angel called a cherub. So what's he doing? He's looking at another one like himself, or is he looking at a reflection of himself in the smooth marble? We don't know. Michelangelo never explained that. He's not working. The point is he's not helping her. His job is to be her assistant. He's supposed to help her with this heavy book or, whatever task there is at the moment. He's not. It's a humorous little vignette. You don't need to know that word. That's a French word. Just a humorous detail, you could say, where Michelangelo is showing how this little cherub or baby boy angel is not helping his, partner, if you want to say, or his. He's not doing what he's supposed to. So that's a little touch of humor. The last thing I'll say about the meaning is this is the most realistic, and then we'll do a couple of elements of composition and go on to the next slide. This is the most realistic portrayal, not just this painting, but all of Michelangelo's paintings of figures, of human figures. This isn't a human, but of course, it had to be posed for. He had a model that he had to do the sketch from, and then he painted it on the ceiling. The point is, here we go. This is the last fact you should have in your notes about the meaning. Michelangelo was the most realistic painter of human anatomy, you could say, or the human body ever, up until his time. Now, since then, people have done that. He was the most realistic painter of human anatomy or the human body up until his era. How did he know how to do that? That's one last fact of it. Some of you do know. What did Michelangelo do in order to know, or learn, I should say, learn how to paint the human body? Anybody? Nobody knows? I bet a couple of you have heard.
I'm not familiar with his history, but if he was familiar with human anatomy, was he a physician before he became an
that's
artist?
a good guess. Excellent guess. You're pretty much in the ballpark and on the right track. No, but he did what there were doctors, it sounds like that back then, who were legally allowed to dissect cadavers. He was an art student. He never did actually practice medicine or even think about doing that. He was an artist from the time he was 12 years old. he was doing art. He was breaking the law. The point is, he was conducting, you can say, or carrying out, however you want to write it, illegal dissections of dead bodies. The right word is cadavers. So not because he was a ghoul, right, but because he wanted to understand how the human body looks and functions, how muscles are attached, to bone, and how, joints look and work or behave. In other words, just keep it simple and say he studied human anatomy through the dissection of cadavers, or if you prefer to say corpses or dead bodies, which was illegal. He could have been in trouble, but he felt he had to do it. Da Vinci did it too, but Da Vinci was famous earlier. Da Vinci was older, like 20 years older, more than 20 years older, and he was allowed to do it legally because he sort of taught himself about medicine, and so people just let him do it. But Michelangelo had to do it in secret when he was like in his late teens, a young art student. So ever since his early days as an artist, when he cut up cadavers, he was able to portray the human body more realistically than anyone before. Okay, now let's get up close. It should be easy enough to see. What do you notice about, well, now, you know what? Let's do the full view. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's better if we do that. What do you notice about her pose? Let's get right to the point here. What's happening with, what do you see? I mean, with the way she's sitting, is there anything unusual about it?
She's bent and twisted. Her legs are off to the
twisted. That's a good word. Her pose is a twisted pose, or she's sitting in an unusually curved set of angles. Her whole body is formed with curves. The pose is. Okay, there we go. Let's hope that just goes away. It says, okay, good. So what is that in terms of composition? I'll just get to the chase because we want to get through all 4 slides, and maybe we can end a 5 minutes early. We'll have to see. Okay, so her pose is dynamic, and that's because here's the definition of the first out of all 9 elements. We're not going to get to them all tonight. I want to start slow, and you'll have them all in a handout you will be getting by this weekend, probably Friday, that you should print out and have with you. So when we go over them together in class next week, by the end of that lecture, the second week, you'll be more clear on how to recognize each of these types of elements of composition, they're called, or you could say techniques the artist uses. Okay, what does it mean to say the artist is using a dynamic pose? Here's that definition. Anything in a work of art with two or more curved and or, the only way to say it, 2 or more curved and or diagonal lines is a dynamic work of art. Well, look, her whole body is made up of curved lines. And then the book is 2 diagonal lines, isn't it? The open pages or covers of the book, yeah. And the baby angel. There's nothing straight in the whole painting except this huge, or I should say the wooden box on which her toe, by the way, I'll go up and close. You see the largest toe ever painted, some people say, in the history of Renaissance art is that woman's toe. In any case, the point is that there are only 2 variations when it comes to something being dynamic. If it has 2 or more curved lines, at least that section of a painting or drawing or photo or even a building or sculpture, any work of art can be dynamic. At least part of it is the area where you see curved or diagonal lines. So what's the opposite? Some of you already know, or you can guess, of dynamic: stable. So this is the only totally stable part of the painting, the wooden box she's resting her foot on. Although some people make the case that the wall panels here, these are sculptural panels. You don't need to know this term. We'll get to it later. Bas-relief, they're called. Some of you know that term. These sets of figures, the figures are not stable. They're dynamic, but maybe the borders around them are straight lines. So I'll say it again. Anything with straight lines or right angles is stable in a visual work of art, whether it's just part of it or all of it. So you have to look at the whole work of art and then just figure out if most of the lines, and here it's obvious, the vast majority of the lines here are curved, aren't they? Her whole body is, as is the baby angel or cherub, and her clothing. I mean, all of it is, even the way her head is tilted, and the book she's holding. So this is like, you know, almost entirely or mostly a dynamic work of art with only a small section. That wooden box maybe at the bottom is stable. Okay, what about the color of her dress? What do you notice about that?
It's bright, it pops out, particularly in the center, but or towards the extremities, it's more bland and reserved,
Yeah,
sort of
yeah,
whites
you got
and
excellent.
tans.
Yeah, so that's a good point. And now we'll make this the second of the elements that we'll discuss on this slide. I'm not going to do all 9 elements on any one slide, or we'll never get through the semester, but I'll do say 3 on each slide tonight. And then later I might do as many as 6, unless the slide is so important. The techniques the artist used was part of the meaning or importance. Then I might do all 9 elements. So let's just do this and one more and then move on to the next slide. Yeah, you touched on it. Excellent. William, right? The color of her dress and her skin and her hair, those are all, some people would say bright, but the right term, the one you need to use if it's on your, is this, there we go. Now, can you hear me again? Because boy, I sure hope so. Can people hear me?
Yep.
No,
Yep.
good.
Can you share that slide again?
Sorry?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Okay, so actually it's in a way it's better because the image is full screen here. All right, so the point is the colors that you see that most people would call bright, the right word is warm. These are warm tones. They are earth tones is the other way to say it. So you can say it either way, but the most common way artists, and in this class you will need to say it, is if the colors are earth tones, they come from nature or things that are natural in or on the earth. And that do, like you said, it was William, right? They pop out at you. Warm colors are noticeable before cool colors. And so the other thing, the opposite rather, of warm is cool, of course. Cool colors are gray and blue and green, or certain shades of green. But warm colors are things like orange. Some people say it almost looks like gold, but gold and orange if you prefer. Pink, some would call this salmon of her inside of her dress there, right? And her skin, all human skin tones are considered warm, by the way, all human skin tones. And then her hair, and the same with the baby angel, the cherub. The hair and the skin tones are warm or earth tones. Everything in the background and behind them that's not as important, including even her undergarment here and the wall and this curtain, are cool colors. And I'll have them listed in the handout, so you'll have that with the definitions written out right for you as we go through them next week. Okay, and then the only other thing to say is, do you notice something about this area? Actually, we're running short on time, so I'm going to just go ahead and say it. You see the outer edge of her arm? Or even her whole body, I shouldn't say just her arm, but it's most noticeable there. There is what's called bold outlines. He invented that technique. No artist, at least in Western art, had done that before him, even early Renaissance painters. Bold outlines are also around the shoulder. Yeah. Yes, that's the only term so far. That's it tonight. We start slow. Next week, you'll have maybe 4 terms. Yes, everybody hear that? So those 2 definitions are the only 2 you needed from this lecture. And if you missed them, they'll be on the YouTube. Cherub was a baby angel often found in Renaissance art. And we should keep moving. But anyway, that'll be in the video too on YouTube by Friday. All right, so the outline of line is another technique or element of composition. And in this one, all of the outer lines are called outline, or bold or thick, you could even say, but bold's the right word for art history purposes. So this has bold outlines around the living bodies of any, these aren't human, so we don't want to say human bodies, but he did that with all his figures. That's the right word, figures, whether they were, you know, holy figures or mythical figures or actual real people in his paintings. Michelangelo invented the technique of bold outlines. Okay, now those are new concepts, so if they're still unclear to you or they're nebulous, don't worry yet, it's still early, but just take the notes as best you can. Okay. Now, this is the next must know, and this caused a big controversy, this painting. Uh-oh. Somebody can't see the screen. I think that might be at your end, but it could be bandwidth that comes and goes. Oh, boy. Can, because I did hit share screen as screen share.
I can't see it either.
Uh-oh.
We can see you, but we can't see the shared screen.
All right. So, all right, then let me do this. I'm trying to figure out how to do this without losing the entire meeting. This hasn't happened very often. I think once last semester. Okay, so I think I know what to do. Hang on. Restore down. Let's try that. And then let's get this. Hang on. This should do it. Oh, that didn't do it. Why isn't it? Yeah, there are times when this technology is not so great. Hang on, don't give up yet. Let's see. Full screen. I'll just say full screen. Okay, let's try the screen share function again. And let's see if we can get this back up to where you guys can see it. Hopefully that's better. I can see you now, which I couldn't before.
I got it.
Yep.
I can
got
see it now.
Okay, good. Yeah, what a frustrating thing. But anyway, thank you all. Yeah, for your patience once again, yet again. Okay, let's move this out and let's get this large enough. All right, maximize. Okay. All right. So what we see here is Luncheon on the Grass, it's called. Luncheon on the Grass. And I'm trying to hide this. Let's see, show grid. So it doesn't keep, there we go. Okay. All right. Yeah, now my bandwidth is, hang on. Let's wait till it goes back. Okay. So I'll give you the title, Luncheon on the Grass. I know you can spell all of those words. Luncheon on the Grass. The artist's name is Manet, or if you're from Indiana, like my favorite Anne, bless her soul, she passed away a few years ago. She knew her history of art. She had great books on art in her home, but she couldn't pronounce foreign names because she was from Indiana. Anybody from Indiana, don't take it personally. I spent every summer of my childhood there. It's my mother's side of my family. Manet is how you pronounce it. M-A-N-E-T. 1863. Why was this painting controversial? Now we're on the meaning. Remember, that's how to start all the note taking for each of the slides in the syllabus. Well, there's a lot to say about the meaning, but let's just hit the highlights. It was controversial for two reasons. First and foremost, the nudity of the woman. And of course, it would be understandable if people assumed that there was some kind of chauvinistic reason for that. Actually, according to most research, that isn't the case, because we know who these people were. Manet himself is probably this man. Some people think it's this guy because they both had beards and looked a lot alike, but they're two of the first Impressionist painters, Manet and a friend of his named Pissarro. Don't worry how to spell it, just write it like it sounds. So two of the first or earliest, you could say, Impressionist artists, including the artist of this painting, are depicted lying back on the grass, having a picnic, and this woman was one of their patrons. She was well known, a wealthy patron who decided that Impressionists were some group of artists or people that she wanted to support. Most people did not like Impressionism, believe it or not. They were attacked in the press and in the media, and there was a media then, of course, it was all print media. Back in the 1860s as amateurs insulting the public and so forth. So she chose, according, just say some historians, keep it simple, believe that the woman who is depicted nude here was by choice, her choice, so she could generate publicity. Of course, that's pretty obviously an effective technique, because even in France in the 1860s, this would have caused a major controversy. The fact that she was being shown nude, as though she posed outdoors. Of course she didn't. She posed inside the artist Monet's studio for this painting. But some historians, many actually, believe she chose to do that to help their careers, both of these, but especially Monet's, because it certainly got them a lot of publicity, not all of it good. But you know how they say there's no such thing as bad publicity? I don't know if that's really true anymore. But in any case, we do, know that there is some evidence that she might have chosen to be. She certainly chose to pose for the painting, that we know, and did it indoors. Then he superimposed all three of their bodies on this scene of grass in a big park, like Central Park in Paris. They don't call it that, but it was the biggest park in Paris. And then the other reason it was controversial, if you can believe this, is the upper third. So let's go up and see that. Everything above from the pond all the way to the horizon is impressionist. That hadn't even been a term. Nobody had used that or conceived of that idea. We'll define impressionism later. We're not, it's too much to hit you with all the new definitions tonight for each slide. But I'll just say it was a radical departure from strictly. It is not a strictly realistic style painting. And that was insulting to more critics than the nudity of the woman. Believe it or not, that got more negative press than the nude female figure. So it was controversial for both reasons. The style of the upper third is not strictly realistic. Some people say soft, out of focus. That's partially true, but that's too simplistic to define Impressionism. We'll get to Impressionism after the midterm. So just for now, just say it was a new style, which was not sharp and realistic. The rest of the painting below the pond was, though, if you look at it as a whole, pretty sharp and realistic images. Yes, it has to do with light. Yeah, I think I recognize you from one of my earlier classes. Yeah, Luis, welcome. Yeah,
Thanks.
I enjoyed your paper about the controversy from that film about the Current Wars, it was called, right? I think you were the one that wrote that.
Right.
And the Ferris wheel.
Mm-hmm.
The first Ferris wheel, yeah. Anyway,
Thanks.
Thank you for every.
Professor Mark, I
Yes?
think we all just missed everything you said about this last slide. Not everything, but like half of what you just said.
Well, I don't know how far back that means. I can repeat some of it.
There
but-
was a good chunk. We got to kind of the part where you said
Uh-huh.
it was vaguely impressionist, but then it
Okay, yeah,
That's fine.
Impressionism, it was not even a movement yet. He was experimenting, just put it that way, with not using realism. Okay, let's just keep it simple. This part of the painting is not realistic from the pond. Yeah, not at all. Yeah, look at the difference. These are sharp figures in every detail. They're as realistic as any Renaissance painting like the one we just saw of Michelangelo's. But above, not her body so much, but her clothing. And look at the horizon and the trees in the distance and the grass and the water in the pond. It's all impressionistic. Just keep it simple and write it that way. That was an insult, according to the media at that time. The public was being insulted with an amateurish, childish, unfinished. That's what they called this. I'm not exaggerating. Those are actual insults thrown at the painter. He suffered his career at first because he experimented. He was ahead of his time, obviously. He's the first Impressionist painter. Well, there are people who argue with that. They'll say Monet and Monet together, both. But in any case, just say he was one of the founders of Impressionism, and he was so far ahead of his time that when he used less strictly realistic detailing on the upper third, just keep it simple, the upper third of the painting isn't super sharp and realistic. That caused him to get a lot of criticism. So that was the other controversy besides the nudity.
Doesn't work.
Please go ahead. Sorry, I didn't hear what you said. Is that
We can't see the painting.
again? Oh, wow. I'll do what I did before and that should work. Yeah. Yeah, it probably is the weather. At least that's what I have been told. So let's do this where we maximize. It worked before, so let's hope it works again. Thank you for pointing that out because I didn't know. I would never know if I didn't have you guys. Hopefully you can see it now.
Yeah, there it is. Thank you.
Okay, good. Yeah. All right. And then let's get, oh yeah, we got to get this. I always forget, how do you get this hide thumbnail video? Yeah, there we go. All right, so you can keep it simple and say there are two controversies. One was the nudity of the female figure, and the other was that the upper portion or upper third of the painting was not strictly realistic. It was impressionistic. That's with an IM. Okay, formal analysis. Well, What about the fact that the upper third doesn't have sharp detail? So when you see that on the human three figures in the foreground, there we go, the three figures in the front, you see their clothing and their, bodies and their faces, they're pretty sharp and realistic. This picnic basket, the fruit, and that's called simulated textures. That's another technique. So now you've gotten a fourth one about how artists create works of art. One of the 9 elements they use is called simulated textures. Now that's mostly on painting. You don't see it so much, and drawing. You don't see it so much on architecture, and you sometimes see it in sculpture, often, I should say often. But with the painting, it's the artist using the paint, of course, to create the illusion of a real texture. So here are the simulated textures on the right. I'll keep it very focused now if you didn't already write this. They quote simulated, don't put a T in it, it's not too much caffeine. S-I-M. Simulated textures here in the bottom portion, you could even say bottom half if you want, of the painting, are sharp and realistic on the human bodies and their clothing and the picnic basket. But the simulated textures in the upper portion of the painting, especially around the horizon, are soft and diffuse. That's with an I. Not diffuse, it's not a bomb, right? D-I-F-F-U-S-E-D. Diffused and soft textures are what Impressionist painters use. They are trying to make things sharp and realistic, but he was experimenting, so he wasn't yet fully an Impressionist. He was dabbling in it. He was trying new techniques. So just keep it simple and say the simulated textures on the bottom portion of the painting are sharp and realistic, the figures and the picnic basket. And then everything in or just say the upper portion of the painting has soft simulated or soft or diffused with a DI, diffused simulated textures. Okay, and then we're going to go on because we lost a little time to the next slide, which is a Picasso painting, a very famous painting. And that's the title is the name of the city that this was depicting, Guernica, Guernica, Guernica. And the artist's name, as you probably know, is Picasso, or again, if you're from Indiana, Pablo Picasso, she used to say, with that Spanish guy with the big eyes. He did actually have big eyes. Picasso, of course, you probably have seen his name. 1937. Okay, you could round it off to 1930s if you want for the date. You could do that on any dates that are on the tests, okay? You can round to a 0. But the exact year is 1937, and the meaning of this is really powerful. Some of you may know the story. This is a scene from the Spanish Civil War. It's the only way to write what it was, the conflict. The Spanish Civil War was a conflict between fascists and loyalists, they call themselves, but really most of them were communist. They were fighting over the future government of Spain. The fascists won, as you may know. And while that civil war was happening, this incident occurred during the Spanish Civil War. And that's what Picasso was depicting. He was from Spain, right? I just said that, but he wasn't in Spain when it happened. He just saw newsreels. They had film and, of course, news events. He saw newsreels of his home country being bombed by the Nazis and Italians too. Both Hitler and Mussolini, you can keep it simple, Italy and Germany, sent bombers over the city called Guernica, that's the title of the painting, and bombed it into rubble. They killed thousands of innocent, unarmed civilians. It had no military target. It was just a terror bombing. It was a war crime. No question. It was meant to terrorize the population because those people in that city sided with the communist or the anti-fascist, however you want to write that. And Hitler, of course, was a fascist. Obviously, Mussolini was one. And Franco was his name. You actually should write his name, just like it sounds with a capital F. Franco was the fascist wannabe dictator who was trying to take over Spain. So Hitler and Mussolini helped him by bombing this city, Guernica. And it led to mass loss of life, and so Picasso is outraged. It's what this painting depicts is the artist's moral outrage about this event. And so what he's doing is depicting the suffering and the death and destruction. And it's in a style. Another part of the meaning is, what style is it? In a work of art, I haven't said this yet, but always, if you're writing for your paper or on a slide from the exams, you can always, if you know the style of the work of art, use that as part of the meaning in that section. So now under the meaning portion of your notes, it's a cubist, as the word sounds. I'll spell it C-U-B-I-S-T, cubist style, which is an abstract or not realistic, you could say unrealistic if you prefer, style of painting that was invented by Picasso, where he used geometric shapes. We'll get a definition of that. No, we won't in this class, right? Don't worry, it's not on the syllabus. Nor, I mean, this slide is, but not that definition on the list of terms. So I'm not going to give you the full definition. Just keep it simple and write that this uses an early abstract style of painting invented many years earlier, like 30 years earlier, by Picasso. And he called it Cubism with a capital C. It used geometric shapes for objects. For instance, you see the triangles used for the ear of this bull and the rays of light from this street lamp. And this is supposed to be a woman screaming in a burning building. Her head and neck form a triangle. And then we also have ovals, the street lamp itself, the eyes of this bull, right? And this dead man down here who tried to fight bombers with a sword. It's a tragic incident that got the world's attention because Picasso painted it. He was a world famous painter by this time. So he was trying to get people around the world to recognize this war crime and help fight the fascists in his home country. That is really an important detail of this painting as part of the meaning. And it will be for a lot of the slides you're going to see in this class, where sometimes, in other words, to finish up on the meaning of this, a work of art can sometimes get let's just say cause a reaction. There we go. A powerful work of art depicting some kind of social just issue, just say issue, whatever it is. In this case, a war crime. Can sometimes motivate people to take action. And it did. 8,000 Americans volunteered and went to Spain to fight the fascists. Didn't work. They won, as you may know. Franco took over Spain. If you didn't know that, you should write that. In the end, sadly, that wasn't enough. But Picasso nonetheless affected temporarily the course of a historical event, or you could say course of history. He did, because he got thousands of people all around the world who saw this painting. The last part, I should have said this right before that. He toured the world with his painting. He had to have a bunch of people. It's huge. It's so big. It's like 25 feet long. I've seen it. It's in Spain now, of course. But a copy of it's at the United Nations. You could write this. It's on the wall of the UN General Assembly, where every country sends their representatives. They walk by this painting every time they walk into that room to vote on things, because it's such an important image of things that human governments should not be allowed to do to their citizens or other citizens, anyone, right? It's a violation of human rights, obviously, to commit a war crime like this was. So Picasso managed to get thousands, just say thousands, but it actually was tens of thousands of people all over the world. Just in the US alone, 8,000. That's a lot of people to come fight. Now, some of them, like Hemingway, the writer, were already in Spain fighting when this happened, but at least a good portion of them, a few thousand, saw the painting, or they saw an article about it, or they read about it, and they got upset enough to want to go fight against fascism and for the other side, the anti-fascist. That's pretty powerful testimony to the influence that one work of art couldn't have, depending on the artist and the topic. Okay, plenty on the meaning. Let's now do the formal analysis. Are there any warm colors here? No, none. The warm colors are missing. So what happens when there's no warm colors contrasting with cool colors, like we saw in the last two slides, especially the first, the Libyan symbol? It's called neutral. So the way to write about the color quality of this, that element on this painting is black, white, and shades of gray. That's all you see, right? Black and white and shades of gray create what's called neutral color effect. There is no warm or cool here. It's all neutral. And then we have repeated shapes. I just mentioned that. The triangles, right? And the ovals. That's when you see two or more of the same shape in a work of art, it's called rhythm. Very different than rhythm in music, of course. Rhythm in a visual work of art, whether it's painting, sculpture, architecture, or whatever, is the use of two or more repeated shapes. This is full of rhythm. Cubism is all about repeated geometric shapes. That's one way of, describing this style that Picasso invented. So this has a lot of rhythm. The shapes are repeated throughout it. One more thing. Look at the way the painting, before we go into the last slide, and we'll get into a little bit early, I think. You see what's going on here with the dead and dying bodies of animals and humans and mothers with their babies? They're arranged in a kind of, I don't know if anybody's noticing this, pyramid of dead and dying living things. Or you could just say bodies. That's not an accident. Picasso wanted that for us to notice. I mean, that he groups, in other words, or collects together the majority of the dead and dying bodies, the victims, if you want to put it that way, are grouped within this area of a triangular zone, if you want to call it a section. That's called balance. He's balancing this because a pyramid, by definition, is balanced. Of course, each half of the pyramid is the same size. Now, this isn't an exact balance because there's not, here's a little empty space here and not there. But roughly, it's balanced with a number. For instance, look at the bull, and then look at this man who's burning to death in his own home, right? Or look at the figures arranged across the bottom, right? Here, dead and dying figures in this man's arm and that man's leg.
If I may,
Yes, please, go ahead.
building off that balance, if you took out the lamppost, it would all, in terms of the shapes that you would see,
Yeah.
Forget the details, it would almost be symmetrical.
Yeah, symmetrical. That's the other word for it. Thank you. Yeah, you guys are really good on keeping on top of this stuff. Great, thank you. Yes, everybody hear that? That to be balanced, if something is completely balanced and it's identical left to right, the same on both sides, that the word for that is symmetry. So this has what's called a rough balance because it's not totally symmetrical, but it's deliberately arranged. Picasso arranged the objects, all of them, mostly human and animal bodies that are dead and dying. The victims, you just want to say in a single word, the victims, he arranged them in a rough balance from left to right. However, it's not balanced top to bottom, because look at how much empty space there is. Darkness of the night happened at night. Actually, the bombing went on for, I think it was 24 hours, not nonstop, but on and off. Yeah, it was both a day and evening. Several waves. Can you imagine waves of bombers coming over and you have no way to hide from them? Because all people had were these little, thatched houses and things. Yeah, it was a major tragedy, obviously. So this is balanced left to right, roughly, but not, or unbalanced, the other way to say is weighted. More objects are at the bottom half, toward the bottom. So it's unbalanced toward the bottom, but roughly balanced left to right. Okay, let's move on to the last slide, which is an architecture slide. And that's this for tonight. We're going to see that Van Gogh, by the way. We just passed a Van Gogh. I thought about substituting it, but I didn't want to confuse you. It wasn't on the syllabus when I created it. So we'll see several Van Gogh paintings for sure. We'll spend a long time. I'm going to tell you right now, there are a bunch of myths about him, about his ear and the prostitute and all that. I don't want to give it away, but I think you'll find that lecture especially interesting. And also about whether or not he committed suicide. There's all kinds of evidence to verify that many of the things we believed about what happened to Van Gogh toward the end of his life and were myths or exaggerations. Okay, but this is our last must know, and then we'll wrap it up. So do take good notes on this one. Guggenheim Museum. I'll spell that Guggenheim. Guggenheim. There are a bunch of them around the world, but this was the first one. Museum, I know you all know how to spell. Museum. Wright, you probably know his last name, but I'll spell it Wright. Frank Lloyd Wright, of course, 1959. This is a museum of modern art in New York City. And it was the last, these are the facts about the meaning now. It was the last building Frank Lloyd Wright completed before he died. Quick aside, extra credit option, easy one, just driving up the freeway to San Rafael. Anybody know a famous Frank Lloyd Wright building there in the city of San Rafael? See, you can see it from the freeway. The Marin County Civic Center. Yeah, that's a really easy one to take photographs of because it's so big and you can see it from different angles. Yeah, that building wasn't built until after he died, but he did design it. So I'll say it again. This is the last building designed by Frank Lloyd Wright that was completed during his lifetime. It opened just before he died. And it is the prototype for many museums around the world that use these original ideas, these unique concepts. For instance, round rooms for the gift shop and the cafe. That hadn't been done before. And then a ramp, and this is a 6-story, you should be writing this now, and if you need me to, I'll repeat it. 6-story ramp, gigantic, if you want to call it that. Some people say it looks like a child's toy top, right, with the bottom narrow and the top wider. And so it's a giant spiraled ramp, which is the entire exhibit area. The whole exhibit area of the museum is one giant 6-story spiral ramp with a skylight to let in natural light. Very audacious. I mean, now you see hotel lobbies like that, right? You see all kinds of buildings that way. No, before him, no one had done that. It's in Mr. Popper's Penguins and the movie, the International with Clive Owen and Naomi Watts. That's a great movie. They have a shootout in I guarantee they didn't let them use this building. This is priceless.
Yeah, I was about to mention, Mr. Popper's Penguins, like, that scene where they were in this building.
Yeah, right. And they slide down the ramp.
Yeah.
So it's a funny movie. Yeah, but the point is it's a world famous building now. But guess what? This is part of the meaning that you need to also write. When it was proposed, the first design was proposed years before it was built. It took, I think it was over 10 years. You can just say about 10 years to get the permits to build it because the neighbors in this section of New York hated it. They didn't want it in their neighborhood. NIMBY, right? Not in my neighborhood. You've heard that phrase. You have to write that. Just say that at the time it first was proposed, about a decade before it was actually built, the people living in that area of New York City, it's a very wealthy section, Park Avenue area, did not like it and didn't want it. Well, who won that battle? Obviously, Wright did. Why? Because, as another fact, the reason it got built, the reason Wright got the design exactly the way he wanted and finally triumphed over all the objections was because he was the world's most famous architect. Nobody would argue with that. During his lifetime, he certainly was. And he called himself that. That's how he testified in court. He was taken to court a lot. And he usually signed in or, swore himself in, right? You know how they do with the Bible at the start, of course. As Frank Lloyd Wright, world's greatest architect, literally, the guy had an ego the size of all outdoors, but he was the world's most famous architect. And the proof is that he overcame the objections of the wealthiest, most powerful citizens of New York to get this built. Of course, he had the help of a billionaire. The first woman billionaire was Peggy Guggenheim. That's who the museum is named for. And she paid for it and hired him to design it. The last thing to say about the meaning is, what style is it? Well, he called this organic, which he explained as something derived from nature or living things. So there's not a new definition you're going to have on the test. I'm just saying organic is a term Wright used to describe his own style of architecture. How can this be considered organic? It's concrete, glass, and steel, right? Well, he described this as the shape, especially this section here, the area with the ramps, the exhibit area. But the whole building as a giant snail, which if you lived near Central Park, it's across the street from Central Park, right? The biggest park in New York. There are snails. You see them, you step on them after it rains, right? The people who live in this neighborhood saw snails all the time whenever the weather was warm and they went for a walk in the park. So he said, it fits in with the environment. It isn't a clashing. This building doesn't clash with its natural setting. It actually fits better than this building here, which is a big block of brick and concrete, right? This building actually is meant to evoke a giant snail slithering its way up Park Avenue. Well, don't write that last part, but that's how he would have said it. He was very sarcastic. He had a very sarcastic. So he said, don't tell me it doesn't fit. It isn't appropriate for this neighborhood. It fits because it's across the street from a park full of lots of snails. I just made a giant one out of concrete. So let's wrap it up. The formal elements. It's a warm color, light yellow. Actually, it's a little bit more of a darker yellow now, little deeper yellow. But that's any shade of yellow is a warm or earth tone. And then we have the textures. Now on a building, they're not simulated, they're real. So it's a real mixture of three textures: real smooth concrete, you could say plaster to be exact, over concrete, but you can just keep it simple. Real smooth concrete, real smooth glass in the windows, and real smooth metal in the framing. Those are the three textures you can see in this slide. So if you're writing about a building, I'll give you a handout, like I said, for those who choose to write a paper on architecture, on tips on how to write about buildings.
Excuse me.
Yes, go ahead.
Can you repeat that last one? Real smooth.
Real smooth, yeah. Concrete, real. These are the textures. They're not simulated. They're real. Real smooth concrete, real smooth glass, like in the skylight and the windows, and real smooth metal. All three are real textures, and they're all smooth. That's how you write about textures here. And then, is it dynamic? Oh boy, there isn't a straight line in it, except maybe this ventilation shaft here. But even that has a diagonal to it. See, so it's almost entirely dynamic. The last thing to say, though, about this is space. When you write about a building, if you choose to, or I guarantee you that you'll have to on the midterm or the final, because architecture is an important part of the last 600 years of art history. So you are going to have at least one essay each in the midterm and one on the final on architecture. So when we talk about space with a building, it's how the interior is arranged. How are the interior spaces divided? Here's how to write that, and then we'll call it a night. This has two main sections. The exhibit hall, or exhibit area, you can say, is the 6-story circular ramp with a skylight at the top. That's it. You don't have to say the number of feet. Now, if you know the height of a section of a building, you can usually find that online. Then you should add the dimensions. But here we don't have to get that detailed. We're just starting out slow. So just, again, how to write about the space of this. The last thing we'll say for tonight on formal analysis on our last slide here is that this is made up of two major sections, this building, one of which is a 6-story, right, a circular ramp exhibit area with a skylight. The other is the two round rooms. One is a shop, a gift shop, and the other is a cafeteria. And then you could say there's this balcony, and it is a balcony. You can, I've been to this museum, you can walk out on and look out over the street. So you could say there's also a curved balcony if you want to get more detail. If it was on a paper, you would want to say each major, at least the larger sections. So it's about how the interior segments or portions of a building are divided, how large they are relative or comparatively, or if you know the actual dimensions, the measurements, you know, the height or width, you should add that. Well, it's a lot to cover, I know, in the first night, but I'm going to stick around for any questions anybody has about what I've covered. But if you join late, I can just tell you, or miss something, or we're booted off temporarily. You will see, I think it says it's recording, right? You should be able to see all of the parts you missed in the video of it, which I will post on YouTube under, again, the way it's going to be listed is Mark Wilson's SRJC Art History Lectures. And then just look for the individual, the class, you know, course number and which week. This is going to be week 1, obviously. They will always be posted by 7 p.m. On the Friday of the week that lecture was given. So you should be able to find them easily, just to review or to catch up with something you missed, or if you were absent from that lecture. I do want to thank you all for being so patient and so participatory too. I appreciated the observations. They were really good, the comments, the questions. But at this point now, before we sign off, are there any questions that anybody has that they want me to try and answer now? Because if you think of something later, just email me. But I always
Can
do
you
that.
say it again?
Yeah, say
Can you
what?
say it again, how we located on YouTube?
Yes, sure, sir. Sure, certainly. Whereas the Three Stooges used to say, certainly. Yes, it's under Mark Wilson's initials, SRJC Art History Lectures. It's my channel, I think they call it, or whatever they call that, on YouTube. And it even has a logo, but you don't need to know the logo. But once you recognize it, it'll be easy to find. It's because there are other Mark Wilsons on there, but nobody with that handle, with that exact title. And then, of course, this is important too. How you find each individual lecture is you just scroll past the, the title, and look for, and of course, in this case, it's our 1.2 week 1. They're listed by week within each class category. Okay, did that answer your question? All right, any other?
Absolutely did. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, everybody. Anybody else have any questions? Because
Should I email your AOL email to receive the syllabus?
yes, please do.
Yes.
I will send it to you by tomorrow evening, if not sooner. It depends on various things, errands and so forth, and what the weather's like. But yeah, certainly within 24 hours or less. So you should be able to check by tomorrow evening. You should be able to, yes, there are 3 handouts. So I will remember, if you say, please send me the first, you could just say first handouts, but it's 3. The syllabus, the course policies and grading, and then the list of terms. But then I also will send everybody, don't forget this, 1 new handout. Keep it simple. I don't want to hit, there's still several more handouts over the next few weeks, but let's just not overwhelm anyone. So just 1 more new handout, the 4th one, for everybody. So the person who just asked me will get this too in a joint email that everyone who's in class will get. It's called the 9 Elements of Composition. Make sure that when you see that, you download it, print it out, and have it with you at the start of class, because we're going to go over that together. So by the end of next week, the 2nd lecture, you'll understand pretty well how to recognize those elements or techniques that artists use to create a work of art. Okay, any other questions?
Just to be clear, we are expected to turn in our mini bio this week and also do the
Yes,
reading,
thank you.
correct?
Thank you for reminding me. I didn't want to forget that. Yes, if you can. I will give you to the end of next week, but you might as well get it off your plate, right? It's just 3 things. Everybody knows what it is, right? Anybody need me to repeat that? The
Yes.
3 things. Pardon? Yeah. Oh, you do want me to? Well, again, 3 facts. Where you have traveled or lived outside California. What your work or educational experiences are, what level of education you've had, and what, not every job you ever had, but the major ones, the main ones, the important ones. And lastly, your experience with art, whether it's your personal skills as an artist or your information and knowledge from traveling or going to museums, or your interest, what you want to know more about. So your experience with art, and you could end with a sentence saying what you want to learn from this class. Of course, we're not covering ancient Egyptian art in this class. I do that 1.1. So that wouldn't work. But if anything within the 600 years, 1400 to 2000 that we cover, that you want to know more about, you could mention that at the end of those. I call them mini bios, so please label them that way. Or you can just say bio notes or something, or biography, but do label them as bio notes and make sure they're PDFs so I can open them and enter them or read them. I meant to say read them. Okay, and then I check you off and say, I know you're in class and I'm not going to drop you. So you have until the end of next week if you want to take that long, but I think it's best to try and get it done before the weekend. Okay, any other questions?
How do you get into the Canvas that says that if it's unpublished or not? Because it doesn't.
I'm not using Canvas. I mentioned at the start of this class, it's okay to ask, and that's what we're here for. I don't, because I find it easier to grade off of the files sent to me as PDFs, because everyone can open a PDF, right? Unless it's corrupted, right? Which shouldn't happen to most people. But anyway, the point is it's easier for me to receive them, and of course I forward them to my readers, the ones I don't grade, and then I switch off with them and grade. If I didn't grade your paper the first time, I will the second paper, and vice versa with the exams. So you're guaranteed to have my input, but I check all my readers. I said this at the beginning tonight, so you might have missed it. So no Canvas. It's not, this course isn't at all being taught through Canvas. We're not required to use Canvas, just through my AOL email and through Zoom. Okay, I hope that helps. Yeah, but it's a good question, but if you didn't know that, now you do.
I didn't receive any of the syllabus or any of the handouts.
Well, I just said, didn't I? It wasn't you then, I guess somebody else, that you need to just email me, markw@AOL, right? That's the way to communicate with me the fastest. And I will send you the attachments for the first 3 handouts.
Okay.
Right? But just do that as soon as you get a chance. If not tonight, then tomorrow, and I'll get them to you by the end of the day. By tomorrow night. Okay.
markw@AOL.
Yes, exactly. MARKW, 5 letters. Doesn't matter. They're all lowercase, at AOL.com. Okay. any other questions? I stick around until at least the last questions for tonight are answered, I hope. All right. Thank you all for your patience and your participation. I think it's a good sign that we're going to be okay. The weather can't be like this every week, but it probably was the weather that caused these headaches. So let's hope it just a little calmer next week and most of the rest of the semester. Okay. Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you.
Take care. Thanks, you guys. Take
Bye.
care.
Good night.
You too. Okay. See you next week, next Tuesday at 6:30. Have to do the last. There we go. And